Alright guys, welcome to part 2 of this tutorial on the Loki Bulk Data Processor. Today we will pick up from where we left off in part 1 by learning how to use the custom mappings within the Bulk Data Processor, so let's go ahead and get started. First, let's create a new post-DTO object. I'm going to create a new folder under models and call it models requiring mapping, and then add the new class here, copying in 3 new properties which are post title, post content, and some blog ID. Now that we have created our new DTO, we can define our custom mapping. I'm going to create a new mappings folder and then add a new post-DTO mapping class inside of it, pasting in the mapping definition and resolving the namespaces. The mapping inherits from the base model mapping class and takes a type parameter of the class that you wish to map. In our case, we pass in the post-DTO. The constructor of the mapping class is where we will define the mapping itself. The map method takes a lambda expression, which describes the property that we wish to map from, and the toDestination method takes a string value, which is the name of the database column that we wish to map to. It is worth noting here that the column name is case sensitive. Now that we have created our mapping, we need to tell the Bulk Data Processor how to find the mappings class. So let's head over to the startup file and locate the add Loki Bulk Data Processor method and add a second parameter, which is the assembly that the mapping was created in. In our case, that is the executing assembly, so we will call assembly.getExecutingAssembly. We are now ready to implement our new controller method to make use of this mapping, so I'm going to go over to the Bulk Processor controller and paste in a new save models with mapping method, resolving the namespace for the DTO object. As you can see, the code is almost identical to the save models without mapping method. We create the post DTO objects in the same manner as before, using a for loop to create a list of post DTOs. The save async method on the Bulk Data Processor has not changed either. We are still calling the save async method, passing in the collection of post DTOs and the name of the post data table also. Let's now put a breakpoint on the save async method and run the solution. Over in Postman, select the Save Post Models with Mapping HTTP request on the left hand side and click on the send button, ensuring that the items parameter is set to 100,000 items again. Once the breakpoint has been hit, we will take a note of the new blog ID, which is set to 3, and then step over the breakpoint by pressing F10. This time, it has taken 5.7 seconds to save 100,000 posts to the database, so let's go over to SQL Server and update our query to return posts with the blog ID equals 3. And there is the confirmation that the mappings have worked and the data has been saved correctly to the database. Using a custom mapping in the Bulk Data Processor is an all-or-nothing approach. If you do decide to use the custom mapping, you cannot mix this with the default mapping approach. For example, say the title property matched the database column name exactly, I would still have to tell the custom mapping to map this property. Not doing so would cause the Bulk Data Processor to ignore the title property completely. Let's go ahead and demonstrate this just now. I'm going to go ahead and comment out the title property from the post DTO mapping, and then I will remove the breakpoint on the save async method before running the application. Over in Postman, I will only create 1,000 items this time and click the send button. Now that the HTTP request has completed, let's go over to SQL Server. I'm going to select all posts where the blog ID equals 4, and as you can see this time 1,000 items have indeed been saved to the post table, however the title column has now been inserted as null. Creating a data table mapping is very similar to creating an object mapping, so let's go ahead and create a new mapping class in the mappings folder. We will call the class file post data table mapping, and then I will paste in the mapping class implementation and resolve the mappings namespace again. This time the mapping inherits from the base data table mapping class, and by doing so we are required to override the source table name property. In this case, we have set this value to post data table. As before, the mappings are defined in the constructor, and the way they are defined is almost identical. This time the map method takes a string value, representing the name of the in-memory data table column header, and the toDestination column method works exactly as it did before. Now that we have created the mapping, I'm going to go back over to the Bulk Processor controller and paste in a new SavePost data table using mapping method. As you can see, this time when we create our data table, we are assigning the table name property to the same value we created in our mappings. When we add the data columns, the column names should equal those specified in the mapping exactly. The rest of the code has not really changed, and we still pass in the in-memory data table and the name of the post database table into the saveAsync method on the Bulk Data Processor. I'm now going to go ahead and put a breakpoint again on the saveAsync method and run the application. Over in Postman, I'll select the Save Post Data Table with Mapping HTTP request on the left hand side, setting the items parameter to 100,000 again and press the send button. Once the breakpoint is hit, note that a new blog has been created with an ID of 5 and then skip over the breakpoint. This time the saveAsync method was executed in 1.9 seconds, so let's go over to SQL Server and update the where clause so that we only return posts where the blog ID is equal to 5. And there's confirmation again that we have successfully saved 100,000 items to the database. Thanks for watching part 2 of this tutorial on the Loki Bulk Data Processor. I intend to add further tutorials on this channel on a variety of different subjects in the future, so if you like this video, please like and subscribe.